Today. We are here to make some really cute hair barrettes in polymer clay. And this is a beginner level class. So if you have never worked with polymer clay before, you're in the right place. We're going to make a few different types using a lot of different kinds of techniques um, on these hair clips. And so just those techniques will kind of walk you through all of the basics that you need to know to start with polymer clay. I'm Stephanie Manor, and I'm happy to be your instructor today. Let's get started. Let's switch the camera and take a look at the projects that we're going to be making today. So here they are. These are hair clips. They're on a little alligator clip. And I have them arranged here in 4 different groups. These groups really represent the different techniques that we're going to be going through. So the first technique is with patterned clay. If you've never heard of patterned clay before, that's okay because it's brand new and it's at Michael's, and we're going to talk all about that. Next, we have some textured clay. We're going to walk through how to add these textures into your pieces. Then we have some textured clay here, but also sort of a hand sculpted moment there in the flower. And then we have some twisted or faux braided polymer clay. You can see that from the side too. So I have these arranged this way because this is what I feel like the level of difficulty is. This is the easiest, getting progressively harder. You wouldn't think that this one is the easiest until you see this next product. So let me clear the space here and go through the different supplies that you're going to need, starting with patterned clay. So this clay comes in the store like this. It's sold in the jewelry making department at Michael's, not in, they have like a basic crafts department where they sell most of their polymer clay. This is not there. This is in the jewelry making department. And this is what it looks like. It is a slab of pre-patterned clay. And you can see when you look to the side that those patterns go all the way through the clay. It's not a surface pattern that's like screen printed on the front or anything. It is actual slab of patterned clay. And so this makes it super, super easy for you. I'm just getting into this package here, don't mind me. Super, super easy for you to add patterns to your clay creations. Normally creating a pattern like this that I have that I'm wrapping here, you would need to purchase all of these different colors and then have the know-how to create this slab, which is not easy. It's a lot of handwork and you're adding a lot of different elements together. So we've done that hard work for you, and now you get to focus on the fun part, which is actually creating with the clay. So as I said, we're going to start here, but I want to run through the other supplies that you're going to need. So you are going to need some of these clay clips. This is what they look like in stores. They have a flat top and a hinge here. If you have other kinds of hair clips or barrettes, that can work as well. I'll show you some options along the way. I have some basic clay tools. And oh, you can't see that. Let's lift this up. This is the basic clay tool set. And the only thing missing over here is this roller, which I have off to the side. But this has all the basic tools that you're going to need to work with clay, including cutters, including some pointy tools like this that you can use to make details. So you're going to need those. You're going to need a variety of cutters. We'll go through how to use these. I also have a little bowl over here of cornstarch, which I need to refill, but it helps your cutters not stick to the clay. And then I also have some solid clay. The solid clay that's sold in the same area this is flat like this. And then I have I'm just using some leftover clay that I happen to have. These tiny little projects are a great way to use up all of your leftovers. Then I have a ceramic tile here, and this I use as a workspace to work on. It's nice and smooth, and I also bake it in the oven on this. If you don't have one of these tiles, You'll need a traditional baking sheet. This has a little sheet of parchment paper inside of it, and that's what you will use to bake. And then finally, you are going to need a glue because we're going to have to attach the clay piece to the metal clip. And you can use a Loctite super glue. This is the gel super glue, but for a permanent bond, I mean, this will bond really, really well, but you want to use a serious glue here. And so we always recommend E6000, which is like your super duper, takes 24 hours to dry, will bond anything to anything type of glue. That's called E6000. All right, well, let's just dive in here. So here is our clay. As I said, you saw me take this directly out of the package. I don't really need to do anything to it to get started, except we're going to start rolling it out. Along the way, I'll introduce a couple other specialty tools, and this is one of them. These are thickness guides, and this thickness guide is 4.5 millimeters. And this one is white and it is 3 millimeters, which is very hard to see because it's white, but you can put those on either side of your clay. And then when you go in with a roller, that just helps you get the clay to the right thickness. So this will help me know when I've reached 3 millimeters depth. So I'm using my tool here. This came from the basic tool set. This is an acrylic roller. It is hollow. You will see some very fancy, expensive ones out there that are solid. You will see metal ones, wooden ones. This one works just fine if you are just getting started in polymer clay and want to get yourself a set of tools. I highly recommend the set that I showed you. It just has everything that you need. All right, so I'm feeling with my finger here to see if we're at the 3 millimeter depth yet. We are not. So I'm just going to keep rolling this puppy out. We're getting close. Now, if you really want to get serious about polymer clay, if you're starting a clay-based business, I would recommend you might want to think about buying a pasta machine. That's a great way to do all of this rolling without, the elbow grease that you need. So you can roll it through a pasta machine and get it really nice and flat. All right, so that has been brought down in thickness a little bit. And what we need to do is bring our tool in. Now, this is a blade. This comes in that tools kit. Mine has clay all over it because these are real tools that I actually use. But this is the blade. It comes in a plastic case. It is very, very sharp, so be careful. In fact, I've added a little piece of clay up here in the corner, and I just like to have that to hold on to, get a better finger hold on it. So what I did was, I'll show you how I made that. I took a little leftover piece of clay, and I stuck it on the side here. And then I threw this in the oven and baked it. So that's how I made my little hand hold here. It just feels more secure, and I know I'm picking up the right side of it, and not the sharp side. Okay, so let's get back to our clay here. Here's our clip. I'm going to use the clip to kind of measure the clay. So I'm going to set that there. And I want to get a clean edge down here. So just pushing straight down. I'll be left with this little guy. We can reuse him. So I'm going to set him aside. I'll show you how to reuse your scraps. And then I want to get a straight edge on this side. I'm cutting this just beyond the borders of the clip itself. We look at our example here on the bottom side, you can see it's about, oh gosh, what is that? 1/16 of an inch or so around all the edges. Not a ton, not a ton of overlap. All right, now this guy I can save for my next projects. So I'm going to put him off to the side. Let me continue to cut this. All these little bits, I'll keep those. Those are gold. We will reuse them. And this little bit here. Okay, and guess what? That's it. That's how simple it is when you're using pattern clay. The pattern's there. You just go into a store and pick the pattern that you like. You do a little bit of rolling, and that's basically it. This is ready to go into the oven. Now, these polymer clay is an oven-baked clay. You have to bake it in the oven for it to cure, for it to get solid. So this bakes in the oven for 20 minutes at 250 degrees. So it's a rather warmish, it's not super hot oven. Because of that, I can actually bake this clip in the oven. I can put it like this or like this on my baking sheet and put that right into the oven. This in particular comes in handy if you are using a hair clip that is not flat on top. So these hair clips that we're using, these alligator clips, let me get out another one. They are perfectly flat on top. They are perfect to work with. However, there's a lot of other clips out there. There's a clip like this. This is one of those guys that has a spring-loaded type of, I think this is called like a French barrette. You can absolutely use this, but you'll see that it has a curve to it. So adding the metal piece to your clay when it has a curve is really important, because then your clay will bake with that curve already in it. So adding the cooking the clip in the oven isn't super important when you have a perfectly flat clip, but it becomes important if your clip has notches, ridges, or is curved. So I wanted to mention that just in case you're using a different kind of alligator clip there. All right, so this can go straight into the oven, and that's how simple it is. Okay. All right, are we ready to move on to our next one? Our next one in our level of difficulty is adding textures. So these texture, you can create texture with household objects for sure, but we have some beautiful texture sheets that you can use to create these patterns in your clay. Each of these texture sheets is flexible and it has a front and a back. This is cornstarch on mine, which I always use cornstarch. I'll show you that. You can see they are double-sided. And we're going to use one of those in just a minute. Let's get out some more clay. So here is another clay slab. This is non-patterned clay. So you can see that it's just solid. You work with this much the same way. I'm actually going to bring in my ceramic here. This is a ceramic tile. I just got this at a a home store. They're a couple of dollars. And I need to go back because I want to get a few more. I want to get a few that are like the 6x6 tile. I feel like that would be really convenient to work on multiple projects at once. All right, so I have my solid clay out here. We are going to roll this out a little bit so I can bring my my thickness guides here to the side. That'll help me, or not. I can just kind of go at it. So when these come out of the package, they are about 5 millimeters in depth. Are you guys seeing the video okay? Let me know if the video is kind of stuttering, because on one of my cameras, it looks like I have a stutter, but
We're seeing you great so far.
awesome. Okay, good. All right, and you do want to be careful with your tools because if you can see that I use this with some dark colors and the color will transfer to your tools, you can always wipe that off. Warm soap and water, baby wipes, that kind of thing. Because you can transfer colors between projects and you might not want to do that, especially if you're going from working on a dark clay to a white clay. All right. Okay, so let's show you how to use one of these texture sheets. Let's pick one here. I don't think I've used this one. Let's use this one. All right, so when I use the texture sheet, I always use cornstarch. And I have an old paintbrush here. I just go into the cornstarch with a paintbrush, and I've seen people use water for this, but I feel like going the dry method of using cornstarch just, it works a little better. And then, like I said, these are double-sided, so I can choose from a stripe or from this grid pattern. So I'm going to set the pattern I want down. Then I go back to my roller. And so once you start pressing this into the clay, you don't want this texture sheet to move. It's going to want to move on you. So you have to really hold it down with one hand and roll with the other hand. And it also helps if you might stand up during this, because then you can use leverage downward. And so let me keep holding this. I'm going to switch hands here, roll the top. I'm just making a small piece here. I don't need to really transfer this to the whole sheet, but okay, the moment of truth. There we go. So you can see how uneven it is. That comes from being in a seated position. If I was doing this not live with you lovely folks, I would stand up, I would put all my pressure down on this, get a little more even. But for our purposes, this is great because we just need a tiny little piece of this. All right, same thing that we did before. I'm going to situate mine here. Same thing we did before. I'm using my clip to cut this. And I'm also going to try to line up the grids on my clips so that they are symmetrical, which hopefully I'll be able to achieve. All right, just getting a clean edge there. There. And now I can take off the clay that I'm not using. Sometimes it just kind of comes off in bits. One really wants to stick. You'll find that consistencies of clays across brands will vary, and even clays within the same brand will vary based on color. A color like this, which has a lot of white in it, tends to be a little harder, I guess you could say. I know this is looking like a hot mess, but don't worry, we're going to fix it up. Get all this out of the way. Okay. I kind of managed to get that to be symmetrical. And the easy way to get this off of your ceramic tile, because it's going to stick to the tile, is scoot under it with your blade perpendicular to the tile. scoot under it, and you might leave a little bit on there, but that's okay. So this can go into the oven like this, and we can see how nicely it fits on our clip. And that's ready to bake at 250 degrees for 20 minutes. You do want to let that go for the whole 20 minutes. And everyone's oven is different. Your oven may say that it's at 250 degrees. It may not actually be at 250 degrees. So take that with a slight grain of salt. You know, it just depends on your particular oven and your experience working with it. Does it have hot spots? Does it have cold spots? It really just depends. But always err on the side of cooking it longer, because that will make sure that it is super flexible. So I'm going to show you, we're going to pretend that we just baked some things. This is what the clay looks like baked. This is what you get. Super flexible. If your clay, if you bend it and it breaks, that means it's brittle. That usually means that you have not baked it long enough for this polymerization process to happen. So keep that in mind. You want to maybe bake it another 5 minutes. But this is what it looks like. And you can have all different thicknesses. This one, see how thick that is? That works on a clip. And see how thick this is. This also works on a clip. You can see how flexible here. Here's another pattern that we didn't do, but you can see we've striped some clay next to each other. And that's how we've gotten this pattern here. All right, let's glue her on. 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Thank you. Yes. All right, so I'm using Loctite. One little trick you might want to do is to get this to be flat, you can always take some scrap clay and just use that as a holder to hold this. Makes the gluing part easier. All right, I'm actually going to glue this one on. So I have my Loctite. This is the gel control Loctite. This is a wonderful glue. We use this when we make jewelry with clay. All right, and I would just actually leave this exactly as it is for many hours until that sets. But this is the glue that I like. And again, the alternative here is E6000. So this is not dried, but I'm just gonna pick this up and put it to the side in my little makeshift stand. Okay, so that's 2 techniques that we've done. One is patterned, one is textured. And now we're going to move on to the third, which is sort of hand sculpting little flowers to go on the side there. So here, I'm going to start with some clay that I just have off to the side. Now, when you're using traditional polymer clay and it's solid, you want to condition it. And that's what I'm doing right now, is conditioning this clay. And you're just working it with your fingers. You are making it more pliable. You're warming it up a little bit. This helps to eliminate any bubbling, any problems you have with the bake itself. Okay, so I can feel it as I do this. I feel it warming up. It's easier and easier for me to squeeze it. All right. Go in with your roller. Let's roll this. It wants to stick, so I am going to take some cornstarch and put it on the roller. Just like when you're making cookies, you can put some cornstarch on here because I don't want it to stick. And I'm just kind of guessing here how thick I'm getting here. And here is where you're going to go in with some clay cutters. There are so many cute clay cutters at Michael's right now. They come in a package like this, where you're getting multiple cutters in one, and they're just like the cutest fashion shapes. Like this one has a bunch of arches and rainbows. Love this one. And I have my cornstarch here. We are using this one, which is a little flower. Dip it in the cornstarch. Let's do another one. Now, the good thing about working on a ceramic tile is the clay sticks to it. And you wouldn't think that that's a good thing, but in this case, it's a good thing because you can just pick it up like that and kind of weed out everything that you don't need. And what you do need, it sticks there, which is so convenient because I can pick up this whole tile and put it in the oven. So that means that there's no messing with this. I don't have to worry about transferring it somewhere else and getting a fingerprint in it. I'm very ham-handed. So I'm bound to get a fingerprint, a nail print, or something in it. The least I can touch it, the better. All right, so here's when we bring in a tool like this. This again is in the basic toolkit, and you can sort of find the center and then like spokes of a wheel work out the center, pressing in to make designs like this. This isn't the only tool you can use for that. There's a lot of tools in the toolkit. Each tool is double-sided. So you might have this on one side and this on the other side. You can play around and see what type of different textures you can get or effects you can get with the different tools that are provided. That one makes kind of a cool effect. And go all the way around. So, you know, I cut these a little too close together. So after that speech I just made, I have to end up moving this anyway. You just move him over here. This doesn't have to be perfect. This is something that's handmade by you. And we don't want it to look like something that came out of a mold somewhere. We want it to have a little bit of character to it. Mine has a lot of character because let me bring this in. Let's do something else with this texture. Okay. Here are some examples of what we're going for. So in these examples, a lot more pressure was used on each of these. You can also kind of draw into it a little bit. And a toothpick works well for this as well. Let's make that center. I have a tiny little piece of clay over here. Let me just show you how I store my clay. When I'm done with a project, I have a lot of little bits left usually, and I just take those in a piece of saran wrap and I wrap them up, and that's how I store little bits of clay. How I store my flat slabs is I keep the packaging. This is the packaging that it came in, and it's just perfect to put it back in that packaging. This one's not going to fit because I spread it out a little bit, but that's how I would store that type of clay. So it just depends on what kind of clay you want to store. All right, so just breaking off a little piece, I'm making probably smaller, making a dot, a ball. Place that right in the center. And you can press down with your finger or with a flat object. That'll make sure you don't get any fingerprints in it, but we're just gonna go for the organic look here. And I'm just pressing that down. You can go in with your sharp tool here and do a texture like this so that that center has texture or not. I like the way this looks. So that is ready to go into the oven. There's a question in the comment, how long can you store the clay, or do they dry out in a certain amount of time? So traditional clay of one color, it will dry out. It'll get over the years, even with proper storage, it's going to dry out on you. But the good news about this type of solid clay is even if it's crumbly, just work it in your hands and it will eventually come together. Even super old clay will come together. If you're using patterned clay, that's not really possible. If I were to condition this, this is going to just eliminate the pattern and eventually become one homogeneous color. So this is treated a little differently. You do want to use this pretty close to the time that you buy it. Keep it in its original packaging, keep it good as long as possible. If it's a little hard for you, what you can do is you can soften the clay in water. So a bowl of warmish, hotish, not lukewarm, I would say warm water. Leave it in there for about 5 minutes and that'll kind of soften it up for you. So that's how we condition patterned clay, is we can just put it in water, warm it up. But solid clay, you condition it by working it with your hands. Thank you for your question in the chat. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to answer them. I like to answer them live if I can. If not, we have some people in the chat that are going to answer the questions for you. Another one that just came up in the chat is, do I dedicate a specific oven to my clay? And the answer is no. This goes in my regular oven. I don't have a separate toaster oven, but I'm thinking I might buy one. That way I can have the oven in my craft room, which would be super cool. Because this works in a toaster oven as well. It does not work in the microwave. FYI, do not try to nuke this in your microwave because I'm not even sure what would happen. I've never tried it, but it won't work. So you do want to use a traditional oven, a toaster oven, a convection oven. And no, I use my regular oven. I'm just adding texture to this other flower over here. Can you use a hair dryer? I have never heard of that before. You get the prize for most interesting question. Is that a thing? Has anybody else heard of that? I've never heard of that. But so to my knowledge, the answer is no. Yeah, we may need to try that out. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, I feel like you'd have to stand there for a while. All right, so I'm just making a little ball. Can you use glazes? I love your questions. Keep them coming. Thank you, Debbie. You can absolutely glaze on top of this. So I'm gonna show you that. Let me just get this down there. Press with your finger. And then this one, I will add some texture. The texture is cute, but also you are kind of marrying this top color into that bottom color by pressing it down in there. Okay, so our flowers are ready. They go into the oven. They come out and then you can glue them onto your clip, just like we've glued the other ones. We did put a little pattern here. All right, let's move these out of the way because I want to stick with that question of glazes, and I'm going to show you. Okay, so these are baked. This has been baked in the oven. You will notice when polymer clay bakes, this is also baked, it has this beautiful matte texture, matte finish. And I happen to like that. I think that's one of the more beautiful parts of polymer clay is the matte. It just feels, I don't know, it feels expensive. It feels cool. It looks awesome. But you can make it shiny if you want. And I think that's what you meant by glazes. And the product that I recommend for adding a shiny top coat is UV resin. also sold at Michael's in the jewelry making department. This is a type of a product that is only cured in UV light. So you do need a UV light. Here's one. See, I'm turning it on and it has lights in it. And this is how you can get a beautiful, shiny coating. You pour it out directly. Now this is on baked clay. Pour it out directly from the bottle. There's no mixing with something else. You can go in with a toothpick or a wood stick and kind of move that. And now I'm just adding the clay to the center spot. But you could, I'm sorry, not clay. I'm adding the resin to the center spot, but you could definitely make the whole thing shiny. And now I take my UV light. Oh, look what happens. Look at that. That's super cool. Take my UV light, and it's only going to take a minute or two to harden, and it gets a very hard, shiny, glass-like coating. Got my UV light at Michael's. All of this, everything I'm using is at Michael's. So, like I said, it's only a few minutes that's going to take. This runs on this particular light at Michael's runs on a 1-minute timer, and then you can run it again. But I think I'm only going to do this for 1 minute so you can see what happens after 1 minute. And I intentionally just did that little dot in the middle so you can see the difference on this piece between the matte texture of the clay and the shininess that you can get with UV resin. Other things you can do after this comes out of the oven. Here's our other baked one. I could use paint on this if I wanted to do sort of a dry brushing technique to add another dimension. I can do that as well. All right, so that's been for 1 minute. Now I did kind of go over the side here a little bit. I didn't see that before I cured it. You can see that center is shiny now and the outside still has that texture on it. So UV resin, polymer clay, they work beautifully together. I'm going to show you another example of clay, if I can find it. Okay, here is a piece of clay out of the oven. This is actually a stud earring. This is how easy it is to turn a piece of clay into a stud earring, is you can just glue an earring finding on the back, and now this is a stud earring. This is matte. Then I took that and I was practicing with different things that I could use. And so I drew a little face here with a marker, and then I covered over that with UV resin. So you can see the difference in the finish that you get. Okay, so that's the glazing instructions. All right, now we are already at our last one. And these are this braided technique. And it's actually a faux braided technique where we're just twisting instead of actually braiding. So it makes it a lot easier. And for this, I'm going to bring out my light purple clay. And again, conditioning it. Because I want this to be really pliable. And now I can just break off a piece, and I'm making a snake. So like this, and then putting it down here, spreading that out. So you'll see if I use my fingers to do it, it's kind of uneven. Oh, and then I got a fingernail in it. See, you got to be careful with those fingernails. But so, like I said, if I use my fingers, it's kind of uneven. But if you use a solid object like this thickness guide and do the same motion, you are going to get perfectly smooth snakes instead of using your fingers to do it. So keep that in mind. What I like to do is use my fingers to kind of stretch it out like that and then finish it with this. And I want to make this fairly thin. I'm trying to keep it consistent. All right. Let me cut this in half. And we bring two pieces together and kind of pinch them at the top and twist. Okay, so there's one. And now we can repeat that. We also need our base of the clip. So I'm going to use this as my base for the clip. Oh, and it is sticking. We need some cornstarch on there. And I'm rolling this base out really thin because we're adding these twists on the top of it. So it's going to get pretty thick. All right, that's my base. Let's twist some more clay. So you only need a little piece like this. And that's what you make into the snake. So the goal here is you're kind of rolling this out to about, I don't know, 2 millimeters. We measure everything in millimeters in jewelry world. FYI. Because jewelry things are very small. You need a very small unit of measure. And this just kind of finishes it. All right, cut it in half. Two of the ends together and twist. Now, I want to twist this in the opposite direction that I twisted the first one, and you'll see why. Just using a very gentle hand here. So when this one, and I can actually pull it a little bit. So this one, when sat next to this one, you're creating kind of a V shape. You want to mirror the same tightness of the coil between both ones. So you're creating this V shape. See how this is going this way and this is going this way? That's what makes it look like a braid. And I'm going to put that onto my base and kind of press it down on the top and bottom because we're going to cut that off anyway. We're still using the same clip here, which is a 2-inch clip. So it's only going to be from here to here. All right. And then I can keep adding more twists here. Pressing that down. Okay. Now I'm ready to cut this. Again, using my clip as a guide to where I'm going to cut. And about a 1/16 of an inch to the top and bottom. And along the sides. And I'm just going to kind of press this down. They are not fully like seated in that bottom clay yet. But this is ready to bake. Let me clean up this edge a little bit. That's ready to bake. And when it comes out, we'll be able to just glue that onto our clip. And that's how you make faux braided items. Okay, so with the time that we have left, I wanted to just show you a couple other things. You can get really creative. You can use all sorts of cutters to cut shapes. The cutters come from anything large to these tiny, tiny little cutters here. Like this one, look, this is a little mushroom. Adorable. I used that little mushroom to create this. I have not baked this yet, so this is still a work in progress. But I use different cutters like this shape and this mushroom shape and this heart shape. I use the mushroom for obviously these mushrooms. And then I use the heart and the teardrop to make all of these leaves. So I'm still playing around with this. But when I'm done, I'll put that in the oven and that will bake it. But you can see you can get really, you can just keep increasing the level of difficulty. The tinier you get, obviously, the harder that it gets. But this is sort of where you can take this. Thank you. All right, the time check here. How much time do we have? I can't see the time. I need to get a clock in here. But I wanted to show you with the few minutes we have left is how to use your leftovers because you're going to be left with little pieces like this and like random little offcuts. And I just want to show you how to use those. We don't want you to waste anything. We want you to be able to use every little bit. So I just collect my scraps and put them in a pile and then use my blade to chop them up. And these colors that I put in here, they didn't really go together, but you'll see it'll come together. So I chop them up and then I sort of reconstitute them. And roll it out. Add cornstarch. And you'll get unexpected and uncontrollable patterns. So this pattern here looks pretty cool, especially if I'm going to do, let's see, a flower. See, I can look through there and see what that flower is going to look like before I press it down. And I like what that looks like. And there I have a flower. This one didn't get too, let's pick this up and turn it over and see what we have on the other side. And you know what? I can do the same process again. Cut it up. And then reconstitute it. I can add another color in there if I have some new scraps. Just lay it down. Let me move this guy out of the way. And you can see it just turns into these swirly, marbly patterns. Like, I love the way that this looks. This looks super, super cool. And that's how you use up all of your leftover clay. Bring our bigger flower cutter in there. Get all the excess away. And then a fun thing to do if you have a cutter that's the same shape but different sizes, you can use both. Together. So if I remove the centerpiece, now I have like a cutout shape that I can bake. So, my point here is that you're not going to waste anything. You're going to have ways to reincorporate it and use every last bit of this clay. And I hope that I have inspired you to try polymer clay if you've never tried it before. I'm going to end by showing you just a few jewelry pieces made from patterned clay. And these are earrings. You can see lots of different patterns available, really fun shapes. Like this, for example. How cute is that? Do you know how long that would take you if you started with plain white and black clay? It would take you a really long time. but we're here to make your life easier and to inspire you. So I hope that we've done that in this class. We would love to see you go out, try this product, post it on social media, and always tag Make It with Michaels on your creations. That will help us see what you make. And join us again for the next polymer clay class. We do these a couple times a month. So take a look at michaels.com and for our next class, and I hope to see you there. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good night.